Welcome to this video about World War II. In this presentation, we will explore one of the deadliest and most devastating conflicts in human history. World War II was a global war that lasted from 1939 to 1945, involving most of the world's nations, including the major powers organized into two opposing military alliances, the Allies and the Axis. The war resulted in the deaths of millions of people, including civilians and soldiers, and left behind a legacy that still impacts the world today. In this video, we will delve into the causes, major events, and consequences of World War II, in an effort to gain a deeper understanding of this period of history. Chapter 1. The Seeds of Conflict. This chapter discusses how the harsh penalties imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles after World War I contributed to Adolf Hitler's and his Nazi Party's rise. The Treaty of Versailles imposed significant economic, territorial, and military restrictions on Germany, which led to widespread resentment and anger among the German people. This resentment provided a fertile ground for the rise of extremist parties like the Nazis, who promised to restore German pride and prestige. The chapter also highlights the impact of the Great Depression on Germany, which further fueled the rise of extremist ideologies. Chapter 2. The Invasion of Poland. This chapter details how Hitler's ultimate goal was to invade Poland and how Germany launched a surprise attack on September 1, 1939, marking the beginning of World War II. The chapter explains how the invasion of Poland was a key part of Hitler's plan to create a Greater Germany, by expanding its territory and resources. It also covers the international response to the invasion, with Britain and France declaring war on Germany, and the subsequent rapid conquest of Poland by the German army. Chapter 3. Blitzkrieg. This chapter discusses the rapid conquest of much of Europe by Germany using the tactic of blitzkrieg. It covers the fall of Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg to the German army, which marked the early successes of the Axis powers. The chapter also highlights the impact of the blitzkrieg on the civilian populations and the military strategies used by both sides. Chapter 4. The Fall of France. This chapter covers the defeat of France in 1940 by the German army. It details the military strategies and tactics employed by both sides, including the German invasion of the Ardennes forest, which was considered to be an impenetrable barrier. The chapter also discusses the role of the French government and military leadership in the defeat and the subsequent occupation of France by the Germans. Chapter 5. The Pacific Theater. This chapter focuses on Japan's desire to expand its empire in the Pacific and its eventual signing of a pact with Germany and Italy, forming the Axis powers. It also covers the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan, which drew the U.S. into the war on the side of the Allies. The chapter highlights the naval and air battles in the Pacific, including the Battle of Midway, which was a significant victory for the Allies. Chapter 6. The Big Three. This chapter introduces the leaders of the Allied powers: Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States, Winston Churchill of Great Britain, and Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union. It also covers the other nations that joined the Allies, including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, China, and many others. The chapter discusses the tensions and disagreements among the leaders and their strategies for defeating the Axis powers. Chapter 7. Turning the Tide. This chapter covers how the tide of the war began to turn in favor of the Allies in 1942. The chapter details the Battle of Midway and the pushback against the Germans in North Africa, which were significant victories. The chapter also discusses the role of technology, including radar and code breaking, in turning the tide of the war. Chapter 8. The Invasion of Italy. This chapter covers the Allied invasion of Italy and the eventual pushing back of the Germans out of North Africa. The chapter discusses the challenges faced by the Allies in Italy, including the difficult terrain and the stubborn resistance of the German army. It also covers the role of the Italian resistance movement and the eventual fall of Mussolini's government. Chapter 9. D-Day. The chapter begins with the planning and preparation of the Allied invasion of Normandy, known as D-Day. We see how the Allies, under the leadership of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, managed to keep the plan a secret and deceive the Germans about the intended landing site. On June 6, 1944, the largest seaborne invasion in history was launched, with over 156,000 American, British, and Canadian troops landing on the beaches of Normandy. Despite heavy casualties and fierce resistance from the German defenders, the Allies were able to establish a foothold in France, marking a turning point in the war in Europe. The chapter ends with the Allies pushing the Germans back and liberating Paris. Chapter 10. The Eastern Front. This chapter covers the bitter war between the Soviet Union and Germany on the Eastern Front. It starts with the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, which caught the Soviet army off guard and caused them to suffer massive losses. However, the Soviet Union was able to regroup and launch a massive counteroffensive in 1943, which ultimately pushed the Germans back across the entire Eastern Front. The chapter also covers the brutal fighting in Stalingrad, which was a significant turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. The chapter ends with the Soviet Union's march towards Berlin, which contributed to Germany's eventual defeat. Chapter 11. Victory in Europe. This chapter covers the final days of the war in Europe and the surrender of Germany to the Allies. It starts with the Allies closing in on Berlin, with the Soviet Union attacking from the east and the Western Allies from the west. We see how Hitler committed suicide in his bunker as the situation became increasingly desperate for Germany. The chapter covers the German surrender, which was signed on May 7, 1945, and the celebrations that followed across the Allied countries. The chapter ends with the aftermath of the war and the beginning of the Nuremberg trials, which aimed to bring Nazi war criminals to justice. Chapter 12. The Pacific Theater continues. This chapter covers the continuation of the war in the Pacific after Germany's surrender. It starts with the U.S. bombing campaign against Japan, which aimed to cripple their military and industrial capabilities. The chapter covers the fierce fighting on the islands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, which cost the lives of tens of thousands of U.S. and Japanese soldiers. The chapter also covers the decision to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which led to Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945. The chapter ends with the signing of the surrender documents on September 2, 1945, on board the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. Chapter 13. The Aftermath. This chapter covers the profound impact of the war on the world and the beginning of the Cold War. It starts with the death toll of the war, which is estimated to be around 70 million people, including civilians and military personnel. The chapter covers the displacement of entire populations and the destruction of many cities and infrastructure. The chapter also covers the establishment of the United Nations, which aimed to prevent future wars and promote international cooperation. The chapter ends with the beginning of the Cold War, as the US and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers with competing ideologies, and the tension between the two countries would shape international politics for decades to come. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video on World War II. We hope you found it informative and engaging. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it, please make sure to subscribe to our channel, Curious Chronicles. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new videos on a wide range of topics, from history and science to technology and current events. You'll also be supporting our channel and helping us to create more high-quality content for you to enjoy. So, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to never miss an upload. Thank you for your support.